The night was quiet in the small rural village, but it was the kind of quiet that felt heavy, almost tense. Dark clouds covered the moon, and the wind pushed against the walls of the little house at the edge of the fields. Every few seconds, a soft rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. The storm was coming closer, but inside the house, the silence felt deeper than the one outside. Amina sat near the old wooden crib, gently rocking her newborn daughter, Zara. The dim lantern beside her cast a warm glow across the room, but even that light couldn't hide the tiredness on her face. Her eyes were swollen from sleepless nights, and her hands trembled slightly every time she adjusted the blanket around her baby. She had been alone for months now, truly alone. Ever since her husband Yusuf had disappeared without a single trace. At first, Amina had believed he would walk back through the front door any day. She had waited every night, staring at the gate, listening for his footsteps. But days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Now all she had left was a quiet ache in her heart and 1,000 unanswered questions. As the thunder growled again, Zara stirred softly in Amina's arms. The baby's small fingers curled around the edge of the blanket, and Amina hugged her closer, as if protecting her from the world. She brushed a hand over the baby's cheek, but her eyes were distant, lost in the storm of memories she tried not to think about. Amina's days were long and heavy. Every morning she woke before sunrise to boil water, wash clothes, and prepare whatever food she could afford. Money was tight, tighter than she ever imagined it could be. She sold homemade bread to neighbors, washed clothes for families in the village, and accepted any small job people offered. Still, the money barely lasted. Sometimes she went to sleep hungry so Zara would have more milk. But the hardest part wasn't hunger or exhaustion. It was the loneliness that followed her everywhere. Every night, when the world grew quiet, her thoughts grew loud. Doubts, fears. The memory of Yusuf smiling, promising they would build a beautiful life together. The memory of the day he left with confidence in his eyes, saying the new job would change everything for them. And the memory of waiting and waiting, until hope itself felt like a burden. Still, Amina tried to stay strong. For Zara. For herself. For the future she wished she could still believe in. But lately, something felt wrong. Something unusual. It had started with simple things, things Amina thought were due to her own distraction. One morning she had found the back door unlocked even though she remembered closing it tightly. Another day, a cup that she always kept on the table was suddenly lying on the counter. At night, she sometimes heard light footsteps in the hallway, but when she checked, no one was there. She told herself it was the wind. Or her tired mind. Or maybe even the stray cat that sometimes wandered into village homes. Anything was easier than admitting something unknown might be happening. But deep inside she felt it, a quiet tension that never left her. A tiny voice telling her she wasn't as alone as she thought. Amina didn't want to seem paranoid. She was already judged by people in the village who whispered behind her back. They said she was too young to be a widow. That Yusuf had run off. That she was imagining things because of exhaustion. So Amina kept the strange events to herself. She kept her fears locked inside her heart. She tried to believe everything was normal, even if her eyes told her otherwise. Tonight, the storm outside seemed to echo her worries. The wind pushed hard against the windows, making them rattle. Zara's breathing was soft and steady, a small comfort in the heavy silence. Amina stood up, gently lowering her baby into the crib. She brushed her fingers through Zara's tiny curls and whispered a silent prayer. Her body ached as she walked toward her own room. She lay on the thin mattress, pulling the worn blanket up to her chin. The lantern light flickered and faded, leaving the room in darkness. For a moment, she listened to the storm. Rain finally began tapping against the roof. The sound was calming, almost soothing. Slowly, exhaustion pulled her toward sleep. But deep in the back of her mind, the unsettling feeling remained, a warning she couldn't explain. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And tonight, it would finally reveal itself. The storm grew heavier as the night deepened. Rain beat against the roof in steady waves, and the wind pushed through the cracks in the walls like a whisper trying to get in. The whole house felt colder, darker, and strangely alert, as if it too sensed something was about to happen. Amina finally drifted into sleep, her body giving in to the exhaustion she carried every day. But the peace didn't last long. Only a short while later, a soft sound reached her ears, a gentle cry, light and familiar. Zara. Even in her deepest sleep, Amina always woke to her daughter's calls. Her eyes opened slowly, heavy and unfocused. For a moment she lay still, listening. Zara wasn't crying loudly, just whimpering the way babies do when they feel cold or uncomfortable. Amina sat up and rubbed her eyes. The room was dark except for the dim silver light sneaking in through the cracks in the window. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, trying to walk quietly so she wouldn't startle the baby. As she stepped into the hallway, the air felt strange, colder than before, almost sharp. The storm outside rumbled again, but there was another sound beneath it. Something steady, something soft. Breathing. But not hers. Not Zara's. Someone else's. Amina paused mid-step, her heart lurching in her chest. For a second she thought she was imagining it. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was just the wind slipping under the door. But as she moved closer to Zara's nursery, the sound grew clearer. A deep, slow breathing. Calm. Steady. Too heavy to belong to a baby. Too unfamiliar to belong to her. Her hands began to shake as she reached for the edge of the wall, steadying herself. Fear crawled up her spine, cold and paralyzing. She didn't want to believe it, didn't want to consider the possibility that someone was inside her home. She took a small step forward. Then another. Her heartbeat thudded loudly in her ears, louder than the storm. When she reached the open doorway of the nursery, she froze completely. There, beside the crib, in the faint glow spilling through the window, she saw it. A shape. A shadow. The outline of a man. He was sitting on the old wooden chair beside Zara's crib, leaning forward, his head bowed as if he had fallen asleep watching over the baby. Amina's heart dropped. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't even understand what she was seeing. A stranger. In her house. Beside her baby. Fear slammed into her chest so hard she felt dizzy. Her first instinct was to scream, but her voice refused to come out. Her body shook violently, but somehow her feet stayed nailed to the ground. How did he get inside? Was he dangerous? Was Zara safe? Questions rushed through her mind like a flood, each one more terrifying than the last. She forced herself to look at Zara. The baby was lying calmly in the crib, her tiny chest rising and falling softly. She wasn't crying anymore. Maybe the presence of the man had somehow soothed her. Or maybe Zara didn't understand the danger lying inches away. Amina's fear mixed with a sudden wave of anger. Whoever this man was, he had no right to come near her child. No right to enter her home. No right to sit there as if he belonged. She swallowed hard and took a shaky step back. She needed something to defend herself. Anything. Her eyes darted to the small table beside the hallway wall. There, a metal lamp. Heavy enough to use as a weapon. Moving slowly, silently, she reached for it. Her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped it, but she tightened her grip, forcing herself to stay quiet. Her breathing came in short, sharp bursts, but she tried to control it. She couldn't risk waking the stranger too soon. With the lamp raised in her hand, she stepped back into the nursery doorway. The man still hadn't moved. His breathing was quiet, steady, almost peaceful, as if he felt completely safe in her home. As if this place belonged to him. Amina stared at him, trying to understand who he was. Something about him felt wrong, yet something else felt strangely familiar. Even in the dim light, she could see the shape of his shoulders, the way his hair fell slightly to the side, the curve of his jaw. Her heart wavered. Why did he look familiar? Did she know him? Had she seen him before? No. She told herself she was imagining things. Stress could play tricks on the mind. Grief could make shadows look like faces she missed. She wasn't thinking clearly, she couldn't be. Still gripping the lamp, she took one slow step forward. The floor creaked softly under her foot. The man didn't move. Her eyes narrowed as she leaned forward, trying to make out his features. A certain smell drifted toward her, a scent she hadn't noticed in months. It was faint, soft, and buried under the smell of rain and earth, but it tugged at an old memory inside her chest. No, it couldn't be. The shadow of his hand rested loosely against the side of the crib. Amina stared at that hand, the long fingers, the slight bend of the knuckle, the faint scar across the back. She knew that scar. Or at least, she thought she did. Her grip on the lamp loosened for a moment, confusion overwhelming her fear. The room seemed to spin as doubt crept in from all sides. Part of her wanted to wake him. Another part wanted to run and hide. And another part, a part she didn't want to listen to, whispered that this man was not a stranger at all. Her breath trembled as she took one more step, leaning closer. Everything inside her tightened, fear, anger, confusion, hope, disbelief, all tangled into a knot in her chest. Who was this man? Why was he here? And why did her heart react as if it had seen him before? Suspense gripped her entire body. She stood frozen, the lamp raised slightly, her eyes locked on the silent figure. She didn't know what she would do next. She didn't know what she should do. But she knew one thing for sure. This night was about to change everything. The nursery felt colder as Amina stepped closer, the lamp still tight in her trembling hand. The stranger's steady breathing echoed in the small room, blending with the distant rumble of thunder outside. Every second felt stretched, heavy, and uncertain. Amina's heart beat loudly, filling her ears with a sharp pounding that made it hard to think clearly. She leaned in just enough for the dim moonlight to touch the man's face. And then everything inside her stopped. Her breath, her thoughts, her strength. The face before her, pale, tired, thinner than she remembered, was one she had seen in dreams and nightmares for months. The man sitting beside her baby, the man sleeping as if he belonged there, was not a stranger at all. It was Yusuf, her husband, the man she had buried in her heart, the man she thought she would never see again. Amina's fingers loosened around the lamp, and for a moment she feared she might drop it. Her whole body felt numb as if the world around her had disappeared. Her knees weakened and she had to hold the edge of the crib to steady herself. She stared at him, unable to blink. His face looked the same yet different. His cheeks were hollow, his skin marked by dirt and exhaustion, his hair longer and tangled. A deep bruise stretched across his jaw, and faint cuts lined his temple. His clothes were torn, damp from the rain and stained with mud. He looked nothing like the strong, proud man who had left home months ago. But it was him. Yusuf. Alive. A strange sound escaped Amina's throat, a mix between a gasp and a cry, though she quickly covered her mouth to silence herself. She didn't want to wake him. She didn't know if she was ready for that. She didn't know how to react. Her emotions crashed over her like waves in a storm: shock, grief, anger, fear, and a strange, dangerous flicker of hope. Her mind spun. Was she dreaming? Was this real? Or was it some cruel trick her mind was playing on her? She forced herself to crouch down slightly, looking closer. A scar ran across his brow, the same scar he had gotten years ago while chopping firewood. The curve of his lips, the shape of his nose, the small mole beneath his ear, everything was exactly the same. Still, disbelief battled with reality. Her husband, beside her baby, in the middle of a stormy night. After months of silence, Amina pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her racing heartbeat. For months she had imagined him in so many terrible ways, lying somewhere alone, hurt, gone. She had pictured him calling out for help but unable to return home. She had imagined him leaving by choice, abandoning her and Zara. The pain of that thought had been unbearable. But here he was, real, breathing, close enough to touch. Amina stood frozen, staring at him as the storm outside roared. She didn't know how long she stayed there, watching him in shock. Minutes passed like slow-moving clouds. The lamp in her hand grew heavier. Her knees ached. But she didn't move. At last Yusuf stirred. It happened so suddenly Amina almost jumped. His shoulders twitching, his head lifting slightly from where it rested on the chair. His fingers curled weakly. A low sound escaped his throat, not words, just a groan of pain and confusion. Amina stiffened, her breath cutting short. She didn't lower the lamp, but she didn't raise it either. She didn't know what to do. Yusuf shifted again, slowly opening his eyes. He looked around the room with unfocused vision, as if he didn't recognize where he was. His gaze was hazy, lost, almost frightened. He blinked several times, trying to understand his surroundings. His breathing grew faster, uneven. He pressed a hand to his head, squeezing his eyes shut like someone battling a deep ache. Amina watched him, her emotions twisting sharply. This wasn't the Yusuf she remembered. That man had been strong, confident, warm. This man looked broken. He looked like someone who had seen things no one should ever see. When he finally lifted his head, he looked directly at Zara first. Not at Amina. He didn't even seem aware of her presence. His tired eyes studied the baby with something between confusion and fear, like he wasn't sure if she was real or part of a dream. His shoulders trembled. His fingers touched the edge of the crib for support. His breathing hitched and his lips parted in a silent gasp of pain. Physical or emotional, Amina couldn't tell. A moment later he noticed her. Amina felt his gaze land on her, and everything inside her tightened. His eyes widened slightly, recognition flickering through them. But then the confusion returned, mixing with panic. He looked like a hunted animal, scared, lost, and unsure if he belonged in this place. Amina didn't speak. She didn't trust her voice. She didn't trust her heart. Instead, she watched him silently, her thoughts spinning. Should she run? Should she comfort him? Should she ask him where he had been? Should she push him away? Every question hit her at once. Yusuf seemed like he wanted to speak, but no words came out. His lips moved weakly. His hands shook. He tried to sit up straighter but winced, gripping his side as if something deep inside him was hurting. He was thinner. Much thinner. His clothes hung off him like they no longer fit. His skin was pale, almost sickly. There was fear in his eyes, real fear, like someone who had been running for far too long. Amina swallowed hard. She didn't know if she should trust him. She didn't know if he had returned because he wanted to, or because he had nowhere else to go. She didn't know if danger had followed him. She didn't know if letting him stay was safe for her or Zara. But she could see something else too. Something she had never seen in his eyes before. He was broken. Not just tired. Not just hurt. Broken in a way that came from trauma, from suffering, from being lost somewhere dark and unknown. His eyes flickered again as if memories were slipping in and out of reach. He touched his temple, pressing down like he was trying to force himself to remember something, anything. Amina felt a sudden ache in her chest. She remembered the man she had loved. The man who had left with hope. The man who had promised to return. And the man who had vanished. Now he sat before her, fragile and unfamiliar. She didn't know if she should forgive him or fear him. But one thing was certain. Yusuf was not the same man who had left. And whatever had happened to him, whatever darkness he had walked through, was not finished with him yet. Amina's fingers tightened around the lamp again, not in anger now but in uncertainty, torn between protecting her child and understanding the truth standing right in front of her. This moment changed everything. Nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after Yusuf revealed the truth, the house felt strangely calm, too calm. Aisha woke earlier than usual, startled by an unsettling heaviness in the air. The kind that made her chest tighten for reasons she couldn't explain. Baby Amal was sleeping peacefully in her cot, and sunlight spilled into the room through thin curtains, brushing the walls with a soft glow. But there was something else, something missing. The quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. She stepped into the living room, expecting to see Yusuf on the couch where he had slept the night before. Instead, the couch was empty, the blanket folded neatly as if no one had ever been there. Aisha froze, her breath catching for a second. She scanned the room. No shoes beside the door, no backpack near the wall, no sign of the man who had spent the night only hours earlier. It was as if Yusuf had evaporated into thin air. Still half asleep, she called his name softly. Yusuf? No answer. She called again, louder this time. Only her voice echoed back. For a moment she wondered if he had simply gone outside to get some fresh air. She opened the front door, expecting to see him sitting on the steps. The street was empty. Quiet. A stray cat crossed lazily, but Yusuf was nowhere. A strange uneasiness crawled up her spine. Aisha returned inside, checking every room even though she already knew he wasn't there. Her mind raced with questions. Why would he leave without saying anything? Why right after telling her something so heavy, something that could explain years of absence and pain? Why disappear after a moment that finally connected them? She felt a sudden rush of fear. Did he lie? Did he manipulate me? Was all of that just to gain my sympathy? But the fear was quickly replaced by guilt, because deep inside she didn't believe that. His eyes had held too much truth. His trembling voice, the cracks in his words, the way he held Amal softly as if holding something precious he had lost long ago, none of that felt fake. Yet his disappearance felt too sudden to ignore. She searched the kitchen. The note? Yes, maybe he left a note. Something. Anything. But there was nothing on the table, nothing stuck to the fridge, nothing slipped under the door. It annoyed her even more. For a man who had just confessed years of regret, shame, and longing, leaving without a word felt like a betrayal. But then she noticed something. On the floor near the couch. A single crumpled piece of paper. Her heart jumped. Maybe a message? Maybe something he dropped in a hurry? She unfolded it quickly, hands shaking slightly. It was a bus ticket. Yesterday's date. One way. To a remote town 3 hours away. Her heart sank. What was he doing there? Why go back today? Did he always plan to leave? Or was this part of a life he still hadn't explained? The more she stared at the ticket, the more possibilities tangled in her mind. Maybe he panicked after opening up. Maybe shame pulled him away. Maybe he thought staying would complicate her life. Or maybe, something darker, something forced him to leave. The idea hit her so suddenly that she dropped the ticket. What if someone was looking for him? What if his troubled past wasn't as simple as he admitted? For a moment, fear overtook hurt. She remembered how nervous he looked when she first confronted him. How he jumped at the smallest sounds outside the window. How he avoided talking about where he had been or what he had done all these years. Had he been running from something? Or someone? Aisha's heart thudded uncontrollably. She paced the room, mind racing through every possibility. She wanted to be angry at him for leaving, but all she felt was worry. Is he wandering somewhere right now? Alone? Lost? In danger? She called his name again, though she knew he wouldn't answer. She picked up her phone and dialed the number he had entered into her contacts the night before. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. A hollow, automated voice that felt like a punch. She tried again. This time, immediately voicemail. Phone switched off. Aisha sank into the couch, holding her head in her hands. Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She didn't want to feel weak again. Not today. Not after everything she had survived. But the silence of the house was too loud, too heavy, and it pressed against her chest until her lungs hurt. Amal's soft cry from the bedroom broke the stillness. Aisha wiped her face quickly and went to pick up her daughter. As she held the baby close, she whispered, "Your uncle. I think he's in trouble." Saying it out loud felt strange, because a day ago she didn't even know he was alive. And now she feared losing him again. But beneath her fear was something else, determination. If Yusuf had run because he felt unworthy, she would bring him back. If he had left because he was scared, she would show him he wasn't alone. If he was in danger, then she needed to know from what. Or whom. Her life had been small for years, confined to survival, motherhood, and silence. But now her world had cracked open, revealing questions, secrets, and connections she thought she had lost forever. She couldn't let him disappear again, not without understanding the truth. Holding Amal tightly, Aisha stood by the window and looked at the empty street. The world felt bigger today and far more dangerous. But she wasn't the same woman she used to be. She wasn't broken anymore. She wasn't silent. If Yusuf had vanished into the shadows of his past, then she would walk into those shadows to find him. Because he wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was blood. Family. And she wasn't going to lose the last piece of her brother a second time. Aisha spent the rest of the day in a restless state, her mind replaying every moment of Yusuf's confession. Each memory felt like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, leaving her with a picture she couldn't fully see. The missing parts gnawed at her. What was he hiding? Why had he vanished after trusting her with such painful truths? Why did his eyes look as though they carried 1,000 untold stories? By evening, her anxiety had grown too loud to ignore. She put Amal to sleep, kissed her forehead, and then sat at the dining table with her phone in hand. She opened Yusuf's contact again. Her thumb hovered over the call button, then withdrew. What if calling pushed him further away? What if he felt cornered? But doing nothing felt worse. She dialed. The phone was off. Again. Her frustration turned into a desperate ache. She couldn't understand how someone could disappear so completely. It didn't feel like a simple decision. It felt forced, sudden, wrong. It felt like something had happened. Aisha pressed her forehead against her hands. Memories of her mother flooded her mind, how she used to wait by the window whenever Yusuf left home as a teenager, always afraid he wouldn't come back. Back then she thought her mother was overreacting. Now she understood. Something in Yusuf had always been fragile in ways he never showed. And now history seemed to be repeating. The next morning Aisha couldn't stay still. She strapped Amal into her stroller and made her way to the bus station, clutching the old ticket she found near the couch. The station was crowded, noisy, alive, so different from the quiet panic inside her. She approached the ticket counter. "Excuse me. Yesterday someone bought a ticket to this place." She pointed at the crumpled slip. "Do you remember him?" The man behind the counter barely looked up. "We sell hundreds of tickets a day, sister. Can't remember everyone. But he was young. Tall. Slim. He looked troubled." It sounded pathetic even to her own ears. The man shrugged. "I'm sorry." For a moment, hopelessness washed over her. Then someone behind her spoke. "Wait. I think I saw him." Aisha turned sharply. It was an older woman carrying 2 large bags of vegetables. She squinted at the ticket in Aisha's hand. "He bought that ticket late at night, didn't he? Just before the last bus." Aisha's breath caught. Yes, that must be him." "Did you speak to him?" "No," the woman said slowly, "but I noticed him. He kept looking over his shoulder. Like someone was following him." Aisha's heart dropped. Following him? The word echoed in her mind like a warning. "Did he get on the bus?" she asked. The woman nodded. "Yes. But he wasn't alone. Aisha's pulse quickened. What do you mean? A man got on right after him. Sat 2 seats behind him. I thought they came together, but the younger one looked nervous. Very nervous. The world tilted slightly beneath Aisha's feet. Someone had followed Yusuf, and he had been scared. Did you hear anything? Aisha asked, barely breathing. No, but the older one kept watching him. I remember thinking, these two are not together. The woman gave a small shrug. I didn't want to get involved. Aisha held the stroller tightly, trying to steady her trembling hands. Thank you so much. As the woman walked away, Aisha felt like the ground beneath her had vanished. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She whispered to herself, someone was following him, someone who knows him. And she realized something else. Yusuf had tried to hide the ticket. It wasn't left there accidentally. It was meant to be unseen. He didn't want her involved. But she was involved now. She stepped outside the station, breathing sharply as she scanned the streets. She imagined Yusuf stepping onto that bus, alone, scared, looking over his shoulder. The image pierced her chest. He had always run from things he couldn't confront. But what was he running from now? Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Something Yusuf had said the night before. I've done things I'm ashamed of. Things I can't undo. Was this connected? Had those past choices caught up with him? Aisha pulled the stroller closer and whispered, I need answers, Yusuf. I can't help you if I don't know the truth. She made her way home, but the silence inside felt different now, heavier, darker. She carried Amal to the sofa and gently laid her down. Then she took out a small box from the top shelf of her cupboard. Inside were the last letters Yusuf had ever sent before he disappeared years ago. She hadn't read them in a long time. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the first one. His handwriting was messy, rushed. Aisha, I don't know what I've become anymore. I don't know who to trust. But whatever happens, please remember I never meant to hurt you. Aisha exhaled sharply, tears gathering. The second letter. If anything ever happens to me, don't look for me. It's safer. Her chest tightened painfully. The third. One day when I have the courage, I'll tell you everything. But right now, I'm being watched. Aisha froze. Her fingers trembled around the paper. Watch. He had written this years ago. And now a stranger had followed him onto a bus. Aisha's breath stuttered. It wasn't coincidence. This was the shadow that had chased him for years. She pressed her hand to her mouth as a cold realization seeped through her. Yusuf didn't just disappear. He was taken by the past he never escaped. And the only way she could save him now was to walk straight into that past herself. The letters haunted Aisha long after she set them aside. Every line, every rushed stroke of Yusuf's handwriting felt like a whisper from a younger version of him, a boy trapped between fear and desperation. She looked at Amal sleeping peacefully beside her and felt something shift in her chest. A quiet, fierce determination replaced her panic. If Yusuf had lived in the shadow of something dangerous, then she would step into that shadow and drag him out. She had lived in fear for years after her mother's death, but she wasn't that fragile woman anymore. She had survived heartbreak, loneliness, motherhood. She could survive the truth. The next morning, she arranged for her neighbor, an affectionate older woman, to watch Amal for a few hours. She didn't tell her where she was going. She could barely explain it to herself. All she knew was that Yusuf had boarded a bus to a remote town, and she needed to go there too. Not to chase him blindly, but to find the truth he could never say aloud. The bus ride felt endless. The farther she traveled, the more isolated the surroundings became. Buildings thinned out into empty fields, and the gray sky hung low, heavy with unsaid warnings. As she approached the town, something felt off. This wasn't the kind of place someone visited willingly, especially someone scared. She stepped off the bus and immediately felt eyes on her. The town was small, too small. People stopped what they were doing to glance at the newcomer. Their stares weren't hostile, but curious in a way that made her uneasy. Aisha's heart pounded as she clutched her bag. She needed to find the bus driver or anyone who might remember Yusuf. She walked toward a small tea stall near the station. Behind it stood a middle-aged man wiping glasses with a cloth. "Excuse me," she began, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "Yesterday someone arrived here from the city. Tall, slim, tired-looking." She described Yusuf as best as she could. The man's face changed subtly, not with recognition but discomfort. "People come and go," he muttered. "But you do recognize him," she insisted softly. "Please. It's important." He hesitated. Then reluctantly he nodded. "Yes, I saw him." He wasn't alone. A chill ran down Aisha's spine. Who was with him? A man I've seen before, the stall owner replied, lowering his voice. Not from here, but he comes every few months. Always quiet. Always watching people. Watching who? The man looked away. Whoever he wants. I don't ask questions I don't want answers to. Aisha swallowed hard. This was worse than she feared. Do you know where they went? She pressed. The vendor wiped his hands nervously. There's an abandoned warehouse near the edge of town. Sometimes strangers go there. I don't know why, but... He exhaled shakily as if regretting every word. You didn't hear this from me. Thank you, she whispered. The walk to the warehouse was long and tense. The roads grew rough and weeds pushed through cracked pavement. The building emerged behind tall, rusted gates, large, hollow, lifeless. But something inside her warned that it wasn't empty. Aisha stood still, her breath fogging in the cold air. Part of her wanted to turn back, to pretend she had never come, never asked. But love, loss, and unanswered questions pulled her forward. She slipped through the gate and approached one of the dusty windows. Inside, she could barely make out shapes, shadows moving, faint voices echoing against metal walls. Her heart thudded painfully. She pressed her ear closer. You said this was the last time, a voice snapped. Not Yusuf's. Deeper, sharper. It is, another voice answered, shaky, weak, unmistakably Yusuf's. I never wanted to come back here. Aisha's breath caught. He was inside. She tried to see more clearly through the glass, but the layer of dirt made it impossible. She needed to get closer. Carefully, she circled around the building, searching for an entrance. To her surprise, the side door was slightly open, as if someone had left in a hurry. She slipped in. The air inside was cold, thick with dust and tension. Footsteps echoed faintly down the corridor. Voices grew clearer. You owe us, Yusuf, the deeper voice growled. You think you can run away after everything you did? After everything we did for you? Yusuf's reply came out trembling. I left that life behind. I paid for my mistakes. I don't want trouble anymore. Trouble doesn't care what you want. Aisha's eyes widened. It wasn't just fear she heard in Yusuf's voice, it was guilt. Heavy. Suffocating. This was the past he ran from. The past he believed he deserved. She moved slowly, staying behind pillars and scattered crates until she finally saw them. Yusuf stood in the center of the warehouse, shoulders hunched, face pale. Across from him stood a man with a scar slicing across his cheek, expression cold as iron. Two other men stood behind him, arms crossed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a trap. You disappeared for years, the scarred man said. We let you live because you promised silence. But now you're back, talking to your sister. Staying in the city. You think that doesn't reach us? Aisha felt her heart crack. Yusuf had been protecting her. Even in his disappearance, he had been keeping danger away from her door. I kept my promise, Yusuf whispered. I told her nothing. I told no one anything. And yet here you are, the man sneered, stepping closer. And now she's looking for you too. Aisha froze. They knew she was here. They had been watching her. Yusuf's head snapped up. His voice cracked with panic. You stay away from her. She has nothing to do with this. Oh, Yusuf, the man laughed darkly. Everything is connected now. Before Aisha could process the words, a cold voice behind her whispered. Looking for someone? She turned quickly. One of the men had found her. Her pulse exploded. They knew she came. They were expecting her. In that moment, Aisha realized the truth. Yusuf had never truly escaped his past. And now neither had she. Aisha's breath caught as the man stepped behind her, his presence cold and heavy. She froze, her mind racing, but her fear wasn't for herself, it was for Yusuf, for them all. For whatever waited ahead if she failed to act. The warehouse felt too big and too dark, like it was swallowing her whole, yet something inside her refused to back down. The man shoved her forward, forcing her into the open space where Yusuf stood surrounded. Yusuf's eyes widened with horror when he saw her. His whole body changed. His fear, his guilt, his exhaustion fell away, replaced with a desperate, protective instinct that came from somewhere deeper than pain. He stepped forward as if he could shield her with his own body. But the scarred man raised a hand, stopping him. So, the leader said smoothly, this is the sister who's been searching for answers. He circled her slowly, studying her face. You must care for her deeply, Yusuf. Enough to keep secrets. Enough to lie. Aisha stood straight despite the trembling in her legs. She met the man's eyes. She didn't look away, not even when his gaze sharpened. I just came to bring him home, she said quietly. Nothing more. The scarred man smirked. Home? People like us don't get homes. We get choices. Ugly ones. Yusuf shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. She had nothing to do with this. Let her go. I'll do whatever you want. Just leave her out of it. The leader's eyes narrowed. You disappeared once. We won't give you the chance again. A heavy silence filled the room. Aisha felt her heart pounding so loudly she wondered if everyone else could hear it. She wasn't strong like Yusuf. She wasn't used to danger. But something inside her rose with a quiet, firm voice, a voice she had ignored for years. I won't run from fear anymore. She stepped toward Yusuf, ignoring the furious whispers from the men behind her. Every step made her heart feel like it would burst, but she forced herself forward. Yusuf looked like he might break apart at any moment, eyes shining, limbs shaking. She reached him, placing a hand on his arm. For the first time in years they faced the world together. You don't get to decide who I fear, she whispered to him, her words meant only for him, yet loud enough that everyone heard. Yusuf's tears finally fell. Not of despair, but of relief. The leader scowled. His patience cracked. Enough. We end this today. He raised his hand to signal his men. They moved forward. In that split second, everything erupted. Yusuf lunged, grabbing Aisha by the shoulders and pushing her behind him. One of the men tackled Yusuf, forcing him to the ground. Aisha screamed, rushing forward without thinking. Another man grabbed her arm roughly, twisting it. But suddenly, the sound of something metallic slammed against the floor. The tea stall owner from the bus station, an older man with trembling hands, stood in the doorway. Behind him were two police officers. The owner looked terrified, clutching a broken metal pipe, but he still forced himself inside. Let them go, he shouted, voice uneven but brave. The officers raised their weapons, shouting orders. Chaos filled the warehouse. The scarred man tried to run. His men scattered. A struggle broke out, officers fighting to restrain the attackers. One officer tackled the scarred leader, throwing him to the ground. The man who held Aisha shoved her aside and tried to sprint toward the back exit, but an officer caught him. Within moments, the shouts faded, the tension eased, and the fight ended. Yusuf lay on the ground, weak and exhausted, breathing heavily. Aisha rushed to him, kneeling beside him. She touched his face, brushing away dust and blood. He blinked at her with tired eyes, almost afraid that she wasn't real. The police escorted the criminals out, and the warehouse fell silent. Yusuf and Aisha were finally safe. But safety didn't erase everything. Safety didn't remove wounds. Aisha helped Yusuf sit against a crate. His body trembled from the aftermath, but he held her hand tightly, as if anchoring himself to her presence. He opened his mouth to speak, but Aisha placed a finger gently on his lips. No, she whispered softly. You don't need to explain now. His body shook, this time from the weight of everything he had carried alone for years. He bowed his head, silent tears sliding down his cheeks. Aisha held him, her arms wrapping around him in a quiet embrace that felt like a promise. She felt the pain he carried, the guilt, the loneliness, the years he spent believing he wasn't worthy of coming home. But today, he did come home, and she wasn't going to let him fall again. Later that evening, after statements were given and the police assured them the men would be taken far away, Aisha helped Yusuf onto the bus that would take them back to the city. He leaned against the window, exhausted, but for the first time, there was a small, fragile peace in his expression. Aisha watched him quietly as the bus began to move. The road stretched long ahead, but something inside her felt lighter. Not because everything was resolved. Not because the future was suddenly perfect. But because she understood something important. Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing to walk forward despite it. When they reached home later that night, the neighbor handed a maul back to Aisha. The baby's small face lit up the room. Yusuf stared at his niece with wide, trembling eyes, as if realizing he had nearly lost the chance to ever see her again. He reached for her slowly, almost sacredly. Aisha watched as he held the baby close to his chest, tears gathering again. That moment, simple, quiet, breath-catching, felt like a doorway. A doorway to something healing. Something new. Aisha placed a hand on Yusuf's back, grounding him. We will face everything, she whispered gently. Together. Yusuf nodded, unable to speak, but his eyes held a promise stronger than words. That night, as the city lights shimmered outside their window, Aisha felt the weight inside her ease. The fear, the confusion, the anger, they didn't disappear. But they no longer ruled her. She had confronted the shadows of their past. She had walked into danger and brought Yusuf back from a life he believed he could never escape. And now, in the stillness of their home, she made a choice. To forgive. To rebuild. To let love win, not the soft, easy kind, but the kind that survives storms. Yusuf sat beside her, eyes on Amal, shoulders finally lowered. He wasn't the same man he had been years ago. He was broken in places, healed in others, and carrying wounds that would take time to mend. But he was here. Alive. Found. And in that truth, Aisha discovered her own redemption. The past had tried to take him. Fear had tried to break her. But love, steadfast, battered, resilient, brought them both back. Together they stepped into a new beginning. A beginning built not on perfection, but on courage, truth, and a bond stronger than the darkness behind them.